I was the good sister who never gave up on my addict brother until he crossed the line that changed everything. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and today I'm sharing one of the most painful stories of my life. It's about my brother Jake, addiction. And the moment I realized that sometimes love isn't enough to save someone, the golden boy who had everything growing up, Jake was everything I wasn't. 3 years older than me, he was the star athlete, the charming one, the kid who could talk his way out of any trouble. Our parents absolutely adored him. While I was the quiet, studious type buried in books, Jake was lighting up every room he walked into. He played varsity football, had a scholarship lined up for college, and dated the prettiest girl in school. I remember being simultaneously proud of him and jealous. Everyone knew Jake Thompson. I was just Jake's little sister Sarah. But here's the thing about being in someone's shadow: you notice things others miss. I saw the pressure he put on himself. I saw how he stayed up late, stressing about maintaining his perfect image. I saw the way his smile would flicker when he thought no one was looking. The first cracks in the perfect facade started in his senior year of high school. Jake got injured during a crucial game, tore his ACL badly. The doctor prescribed pain medication, and at first, it seemed normal. He was healing, getting better, preparing for college despite losing his football scholarship. But then the bottles started multiplying. I'd see them in his room when I'd borrow something. When I asked, he'd brush it off. Still dealing with pain, Sarah? Don't worry about it. Our parents were so focused on helping him figure out his college plans without the scholarship that they missed the signs. Or maybe they didn't want to see them. Jake was still their golden boy, just going through a rough patch. I was 17 and didn't understand addiction yet. I thought it was just a phase, something he'd outgrow. How naive I was. College years. The slow descent. Jake went to a state school instead of the prestigious university he'd originally planned on. He seemed to adjust well at first. He'd call home regularly, his grades were decent, and he even made friends. But during his sophomore year, something shifted. The calls became less frequent. When he did call, he sounded different, either too energetic or completely flat. His stories didn't add up. He'd mention the same friend twice with different names, or claim to be studying subjects he wasn't taking. Then came the first request for money. Sarah, hey, I know this is weird, but could you lend me like $200? I had an unexpected expense and won't get my financial aid disbursement for another week. I was working part-time while studying, but Jake was my big brother. Of course I'd help. I sent the money through PayPal that same day. He promised to pay me back within a week. That was the first of many promises he'd break. The lies multiplied over the next 2 years. The requests became more frequent and the amounts larger. It was always an emergency. His laptop broke and he needed it for classes. His car needed repairs. His roommate stole money from him. Medical bills from a sports injury flare up. I was enabling him, though I didn't realize it at the time. Every story seemed plausible, and I couldn't bear the thought of my brother struggling when I could help. By the time I graduated college, I'd given him over $3,000. Our parents were dealing with their own financial stress. Dad had been laid off and they were trying to keep up with the mortgage. I didn't want to burden them with Jake's problems, especially since I still believed these were temporary setbacks. Then Jake dropped out of college in his senior year. The truth comes out. Came home unannounced one day, looking like a completely different person. He'd lost at least 30 pounds, his eyes were hollow, and he had this nervous energy that made him pace constantly. He claimed he was taking a mental health break from school. That's when Mom found the pills in his room. Not prescription bottles, little baggies with pills of different colors and shapes. When confronted, Jake finally broke down and admitted he'd been struggling with addiction for over 2 years. The revelation shattered our family. Dad blamed himself for not being more involved. Mom cried for 3 days straight, and I felt this crushing guilt. How had I missed this? How had my money possibly contributed to his addiction? Jake swore he wanted to get clean. He was scared, desperate, and for the first time in years, he seemed genuinely honest about his situation. That's when I made the decision that would define the next 5 years of my life. I was going to save my brother. Rehab attempt number 09 had just started my first real job after college entry level, but with good benefits. When we researched treatment options, I discovered that our family's insurance would cover some costs, but there would still be significant out-of-pocket expenses for a quality facility. Without hesitation, I offered to cover Jake's portion. It was $8,000 upfront, which meant emptying my savings account and taking on credit card debt. But this was my brother's life we were talking about. Jake seemed genuinely committed. He completed the 30-day program, participated in group therapy, and even got a sponsor. When he came home, he looked healthier than he had in years. He got a job at a local warehouse, started attending NA meetings, and for 6 months, everything seemed perfect. I was so proud of him. I'd brag to friends about his progress. I felt vindicated in my decision to help. See, sometimes people just need someone to believe in them. Then he disappeared for 3 days. When he came back, he was high and had spent his entire paycheck on drugs. The old Jake, the manipulative, desperate version, was back. He begged for forgiveness, swore it was just a slip-up, promised he'd get back on track. Against my better judgment, I believed him. The roommate year Jake couldn't afford his own place, and our parents were at their breaking point. So when he asked if he could stay with me just for a few months while he got back on his feet, I said yes. I had a small 2-bedroom apartment, and I figured having him close would help me keep an eye on him. Maybe with structure and support, he could maintain his sobriety. Those few months turned into 2 years. Living with Jake during his addiction was like living with a stranger who occasionally looked like my brother. He'd have good days where we'd watch movies and talk like we used to, but then he'd disappear for hours, come back agitated and paranoid, or sleep for 16 hours straight. I became hypervigilant about my belongings. I started hiding my purse, my credit cards, anything valuable. I changed my computer passwords weekly. I'd count the cash in my wallet before and after leaving the apartment. The worst part was the lying. Jake lied about everything: where he'd been, who he'd seen, whether he'd used. He'd look me straight in the eye and lie about things I'd witnessed myself. It was like gaslighting, but I knew he was sick. I was walking on eggshells in my own home, but I couldn't bring myself to kick him out. Where would he go? What if something happened to him? Rehab attempt number 12. After Jake had been living with me for about 18 months, he overdosed in my bathroom. I came home from work to find him unconscious on the floor. The paramedics said I'd probably saved his life by finding him when I did. Sitting in that hospital waiting room, watching our parents cry, I made another decision that would cost me dearly. I would pay for rehab again. This time, I chose a more expensive facility, one that specialized in dual diagnosis and had a 90-day program instead of 30 days. The cost was $15,000 for Jake's portion after insurance. I had to take out a personal loan and borrow money from our aunt to make it happen, but Jake was nearly dead. How could I put a price on my brother's life? This second rehab stint seemed more promising. Jake was there longer, seemed to address deeper issues, and came out with what appeared to be genuine insights about his addiction. He talked about trauma, about using drugs to cope with pressure and expectations, about wanting to rebuild his relationship with our family. He moved back in with me again, got a new job, and seemed committed to his recovery. For 8 months, things were genuinely good. He paid me rent when he could, helped around the apartment, and we rebuilt some of the trust that had been destroyed. I started to believe that this time was different, that the second rehab had really worked, that my faith in him had been justified. The laptop incident. By this point, I was working as a graphic designer and had invested in a high-end laptop for my freelance work on the side. It was worth about $2,500 and contained years of my portfolio work, client files, and personal projects. One Thursday morning, I woke up and my laptop was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd left it at a coffee shop or in my car. I retraced my steps, called everywhere I'd been, but deep down, I knew what had happened. When I confronted Jake, he denied it for 3 hours. 3 hours of elaborate stories about how maybe I'd been robbed, or how he'd seen some suspicious people in the building. He looked me right in the eye and swore on our grandmother's grave that he had no idea where my laptop was. Finally, when I threatened to call the police and file a report, he broke down. He'd traded my laptop to his dealer for drugs the night before. It was gone, probably already sold or traded again. Not only had he relapsed, but he'd stolen from me, his own sister, the person who had supported him unconditionally for years. The betrayal was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This wasn't just about the money or even the laptop. This was about trust, about family, about the fact that I'd sacrificed so much to help him and he'd repaid me by stealing from me. The confrontation when I asked Jake how he could do this to me, his response was what finally opened my eyes. "Sarah, you don't understand. I was sick. I needed something and I knew you'd never just give me money for drugs. The laptop was just sitting there, and I thought maybe you wouldn't notice for a few days and I could figure out how to replace it." No apology, no genuine remorse, just excuses and twisted logic that somehow made me the unreasonable one for being upset. He actually seemed annoyed that I was making such a big deal about it. In his mind, I should understand that his addiction made him do things he didn't want to do, and as his sister, I should be more supportive. That's when it hit me. I hadn't been helping Jake. I'd been enabling him. I'd made it so easy for him to continue using drugs because he never had to face real consequences. There was always Sister Sarah to bail him out, to give him money, to provide him with a place to live. I told Jake he had to leave. Immediately, the arrest Jake moved in with some friends, other addicts, from what I could tell. Within 2 weeks, he was arrested for breaking into cars in a mall parking lot. Apparently, he and 2 other guys had been smashing windows and stealing whatever they could find to sell. The police found drugs in his possession, so along with the theft charges, he was facing drug possession charges too. His bail was set at 3 days after his arrest. I got the call I'd been dreading. "Sarah, please, I know you're mad at me, but I need help. I can't stay in here. These guys are crazy and I'm scared. If you could just post bail, I promise. I'll pay you back. I'll get clean. I'll get a job. I'll do whatever you want." My old instincts kicked in immediately. My brother was scared and in danger. Of course, I should help him. That's what family does. But then I thought about my laptop. I thought about the years of lies, the money I'd never see again, the way he looked me in the eye and denied stealing from me. I thought about how many chances I'd already given him, how many times I'd believed his promises. "Jake," I said, "I can't help you this time." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like forever. "What do you mean you can't help me? I'm your brother. I could get hurt in here. You're my brother, but you're also an addict who stole from me. I've spent thousands of dollars trying to help you, and you've repaid me by lying to me and stealing from me. I can't keep enabling you." He exploded, screamed at me through the phone, called me selfish, told me I was abandoning him when he needed me most. He said I was a terrible sister, that our parents would be ashamed of me, that he might die in jail because of my decision. I hung up the phone and cried for 2 hours. The hardest decision. Jakey called me every day for a week from jail. Sometimes, he was angry and manipulative. Sometimes he was desperate and pleading. Sometimes he seemed genuinely remorseful. The hardest call was when he said, "Sarah, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but please don't give up on me. You're the only person who's ever really believed in me, and if you abandon me now, I don't know what I'll do." That almost broke me, because believing in Jake, supporting Jake, saving Jake had become such a huge part of my identity. I was the good sister. I was the one who never gave up on family. I was the one who understood that addiction was a disease and that Jake needed help, not judgment, but I was also the sister who had enabled his addiction for years. I was the one who had made it easier for him to avoid facing consequences. I was the one who had prioritized his immediate comfort over his long-term recovery, setting boundaries, stopped taking Jake's calls from jail. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew that if I talked to him, I'd eventually give in and bail him out, and then we'd be right back where we started. Instead, I wrote him a letter. I told him that I loved him, that I would always love him, but that I couldn't continue to enable his addiction. I explained that every time I'd helped him, I'd actually made it easier for him to continue using drugs because he never had to face real consequences. I told him that when he was ready to get clean, really ready, not just scared or desperate, I would support him in ways that actually helped. I'd help him find treatment programs, I'd attend family therapy sessions, I'd be there for him emotionally, but I wouldn't give him money, I wouldn't bail him out of legal trouble, and I wouldn't provide him with a place to live until he demonstrated sustained sobriety. I also told him that I was getting therapy to understand my own role in enabling his addiction and to learn how to have healthier boundaries. The aftermath: Jake spent 4 months in jail. During that time, he wrote me angry letters, then desperate letters, then eventually what seemed like more thoughtful letters where he started to take some responsibility for his actions. Our parents were furious with me at first. They couldn't understand how I could abandon Jake when he needed help. But as months passed and they saw that jail was actually the longest period Jake had been sober in years, they started to understand my decision. When Jake was released, he didn't call me right away. He went to a halfway house and started attending court-ordered treatment programs. For the first time, he was getting help because he had to, not because someone else was making it easy for him. Where we are now, it's been 8 months since Jake got out of jail. He's living in a sober living facility, working at a construction company, and attending regular NA meetings. We talk on the phone once a week, conversations that are cautious but honest. He's apologized for stealing my laptop and for the years of lies and manipulation. The apologies seem genuine, but I'm not ready to fully trust him yet. Trust, I've learned, has to be rebuilt through consistent actions over time, not just words. I haven't given him any money, and he hasn't asked for any. When his car broke down last month, he figured out how to fix it himself instead of calling me for help. These small signs of independence give me hope. Jake still has moments where he seems to expect me to jump in and solve his problems like I used to. And I still have moments where I want to rescue him from difficult situations. But I'm learning that the most loving thing I can do is let him handle his own problems. What I've learned at loving someone with addiction is incredibly complicated. You want to help, but it's hard to know when you're actually helping versus when you're enabling. I spent years thinking I was being a good sister by always saying yes to Jake's requests for help, but I was actually making it easier for him to avoid getting the help he really needed. The hardest lesson I've learned is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. It feels cruel in the moment, especially when someone you love is desperate or scared or in danger. But enabling someone's addiction isn't actually loving or helpful, even when it feels like it is. I've also learned that I can't save Jake. Only Jake can save Jake. My role as his sister isn't to fix his problems or shield him from consequences. My role is to love him while maintaining healthy boundaries that don't contribute to his addiction. I'm still in therapy, working on understanding my own patterns and why I felt so responsible for Jake's well-being that I neglected my own. I've learned that I was getting something out of being the rescuer. It made me feel needed and important and good about myself. But it wasn't healthy for either of us. Moving forward, I don't know if Jake will stay sober this time. Addiction is a chronic disease, and relapse is always a possibility. But I know that if he does relapse, I won't respond the way I used to. I won't bail him out, give him money, or let him move in with me. That doesn't mean I'll stop loving him, it means I'll love him in a way that doesn't enable his addiction. Setting boundaries with Jake has been incredibly difficult, but it's also been liberating. I have my own life back. I can trust that my belongings are safe in my apartment. I don't lie awake at night wondering where Jake is or whether he's alive. I don't dread phone calls or unexpected visits. I'm proud of the progress Jake has made in the past 8 months, but I'm also realistic about the fact that it's early in his recovery. I'm hopeful but cautious. I love him, but I won't sacrifice my own well-being to try to save him anymore. To anyone else dealing with a loved one's addiction, it's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to say no. It's okay to prioritize your own mental health and financial security. You can love someone deeply while still refusing to enable their destructive behavior, and if you're struggling with addiction yourself, the people who love you aren't responsible for fixing your problems. Their job isn't to shield you from consequences or make your life comfortable while you're using drugs. Sometimes the people who love you most will have to step back and let you face the natural consequences of your choices. That's not abandonment. It's love that's strong enough to let you hit bottom so you can choose to get back up. Jake and I still have a long way to go in rebuilding our relationship. But for the first time in years, I have hope that we might eventually have a relationship that's based on honesty and mutual respect instead of manipulation and enabling. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone save themselves.